showers, but also colder, and those colder conditions are slowly going to push their way across other areas of the UK throughout the forthcoming week. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Our top stories this hour. The Prime Minister has urged the newly restored power-sharing executive in Northern Ireland to focus on delivering for families and businesses. Rishi Sunak was visiting air ambulance crews in Lisbon ahead of a meeting at Stormont with First Minister Michelle O'Neill and Deputy Emma Little-Pengelly on Monday. The institutions were restored after a deal between Mr Sunak's government and the DUP to allay unionist concerns over post-Brexit trading arrangements. Mr Sunak described money provided by the government as part of the return package as generous.
The deal that we negotiated last year, £3.3 billion, represents a generous and fair settlement for Northern Ireland, and crucially, it is sustainable, and it's about ensuring that public finances in Northern Ireland are sustainable for the long term. That's the approach that we've taken that I think will really benefit everyone here. And now that we've got the executive back up and running, it's right that people have their local politicians focusing on their priorities, starting with public services. There hasn't been devolved government up and running here for far too long, but now we do have it, and they can start focusing on delivering for everyone.
A £20,000 reward is being offered for information that may lead to the arrest of a suspected chemical attacker. New video has been released of Abdul Azaidi in a Tesco store in North London on Wednesday. Police say his last known movements show that he left Tower Hill Tube Station in the East End just after 9:30 that evening. That was after a woman who was known to Zaidi and her 2 children were attacked. Forensic tests have shown a concentrated corrosive substance was used, either liquid sodium hydroxide or carbonate. A 17-year-old boy has become the 4th person to be charged with the murders of 2 teenagers in Bristol. 15-year-old Mason Rist and 16-year-old Max Dixon were stabbed in the Knowle West area last weekend. A 44-year-old man and 2 youths, aged 15 and 16, have already been charged with their murders. Well, the police watchdog has launched an investigation following a crash on the M25, which happened after a police pursuit. Officers from Hertfordshire Constabulary were following a van at around 4 a.m. this morning, but they were stood down before that collision. The van went on to hit 3 other vehicles and a woman was killed. Police say her family is being supported by specially trained officers. A former Wales and British and Irish Lions fly half Barry John has died aged 79. He played in 5 Lions tests and was nicknamed the King after inspiring their 1971 victory over the All Blacks. His family says he'll be remembered as a loving granddad to his 11 grandchildren. Well, for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by simply scanning the QR code that's on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now let's get started.
My thanks to Ray Addison, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to a busy Mark Dolan tonight. In my big opinion, a Labour government is coming. That's fine, but it's my duty to tell you what to expect. And it's not pretty. In the big story after the events of this week, has Suella Braverman been proved right that multiculturalism in Britain has failed? I'll be asking Margaret Thatcher's former top advisor, Niall Gardner. At 17 years of age, my Mark Meets guest fell victim to a kidnap by a human trafficking and organ harvesting gang, threatening torture and sexual abuse. They took her freedom, they took her body, but they did not take her spirit. Lurata Lyon tells her incredible story shortly. In my take at 10, a convicted criminal and illegal immigrant suspected of a chemical attack still on the run. Proof, if you needed it, that Britain's asylum system is utterly broken. Also, as our ex-Prime Minister starts a new movement called the Popular Conservatives with the support of Nigel Farage, can Liz Truss unite the right? And Brexit 4 years on, was it worth it? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe. Plus, at tomorrow's front pages at 10:30 sharp, with 3 top pundits tonight who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. Tonight we have former MEP Annunziata Rees-Mogg, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and hot off the bus or the train, barely broken a sweat, Lord Colvia Ranger. And tonight, King Charles has been pictured for the first time since leaving hospital for prostate treatment. I'll get reaction from someone who knows him intimately well, former royal butler to King Charles, Grant Harold. Plus, the most important part of the show. What is the most important part of the show? Well, it's your emails. They come straight to my laptop, mark@gbnews.com. And this show has a golden rule. We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. So, a big couple of hours to come. We start with my big opinion. There's trouble in paradise, folks, as the Express report that a civil war is breaking out within the Labour Party over Ed Miliband's Green Revolution and its eye-watering cost of £28 billion a year. Meanwhile, there are tensions over Starmer's Israel stance, trans rights, and Labour's increasing caution in relation to public spending. Get used to this. A Labour government is coming, and that's fine. But it's my duty to tell you what to expect. Stifling political correctness, also called wokery, will reach new heights in the hands of a Prime Minister that's unwilling to define what a woman is and takes the knee to the latest divisive woke cause. Strikes we've suffered will get worse, given it's the union barons who bankroll the Labour Party. Borrowing and the national debt likely won't fall because the public sector will expect a cash bonanza when Labour get in. Why? Because those working in the public sector are Labour's electoral constituency. Taxes won't go down to any significant extent because Labour don't really believe in low taxes. And they like to mischaracterise low taxes as trickle-down economics, which is not true. In fact, given the state of the country at the moment, we're so broke, taxes will probably go up to fund Labour's policy ambitions. More spending and generous pay rises mean that inflation, currently in retreat, returns as a threat. And don't tell me that Brexit is safe in the hands of a man that campaigned for a second referendum. No government is perfect, and the Tories have had an intermittently disastrous 14 years in power. Apart from getting Brexit done, I personally thought Boris was terrible. Liz Truss was well-meaning with some great ideas, but in the end, another disaster. She didn't do her homework. It's my unfashionable view that Sunak has steadied the ship, and his underrated Windsor Framework Agreement has ended problems around the flow of goods between mainland Britain and Northern Ireland. And the return of power sharing in Northern Ireland this week is almost exclusively down to him. But running the country competently, quietly, bookishly may not be enough. And running the country is my greatest concern should Labour prevail. Now, to be positive about Starmer, he's not an extremist like Jeremy Corbyn. And the news that Labour will at least not increase corporation tax, possibly bring it down, means that they're serious about economic growth. They're also supporting the idea of no cap on bankers' bonuses. Now, bankers' bonuses are hard to justify ethically, but the reality is that wealthy, successful people generate national income and pay huge amounts of tax, which pays for the public services to which Labour, we are told, is committed. So Labour's noticeable shift to the right in recent days, including the decision to distance themselves from that crazy figure of £28 billion a year to bet the house on flaky renewables, is going to be reassuring to more conservative-minded voters, the kind of people that Tony Blair won over in 1997. But Tony Blair, Keir Starmer ain't. And Starmer's Labour is a lot redder than New Labour's light blue. During Magic Grandpa Jeremy Corbyn's disastrous stint leading this once great party, the whole movement was infiltrated by hard-left activists. The Labour backbenches were cleansed of moderate centrists. So who's to say figures like John McDonnell, Richard Bergen, Rebecca Long-Bailey and others won't reappear should Labour only win a slim majority? And it's just possible that those figures could hold the balance of power. Yikes! Love or hate Sir Keir's policy agenda, it will likely never happen if these rebellious backbenchers get their way. Now, if Starmer gets 100 seats or more, no problem. But a majority of 10 or 20 or 30? If that happens, I believe that this Labour Party in government is ungovernable. Starmer will be doing deals in smoke-filled rooms, vape smoke, for the whole of its premiership, which means chaos for the country and a shift to the left politically. May God help us. A handful of MPs will be able to lean on Starmer to borrow more money, spend more money and ditch business-friendly policies, for which this week they have rightly won plaudits. If Labour was led by a strong, principled figure, well, that might help. Tony Blair, for example, demonstrated a colossal political will and no small amount of courage to modernise the Labour Party and win power 3 times over. I don't think you'll get that from the cervix-free leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, who, in my view, is nothing more than a political algorithm, a human manifestation of ChatGPT software gone horribly wrong. And if there's a hung parliament with Labour as the biggest party, well, it's game over for everyone. Because every bit of legislation will need the approval of fringe figures like Diane Abbott. Let's hope she brings her calculator. The Tories have been a disaster in recent years, I'll give you that. I like Sunak, but the party, not so much. So perhaps it's time for a change, but my fear is that it's a change for the worst. Your reaction, Mark, at gbnews.com. I'll get to your thoughts shortly, but my top pundits, former MEP Annunziata Rees-Mogg, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Culvier Ranger. Annunziata, let me start with you. The bottom line is many people might like Keir Starmer's policy platform. He seems to have shifted to the right in recent days, but none of it may happen.
It may well not, but I'm also not at all sure that most of us know or believe what his policy platform is. He changes his mind so often, it's very hard to understand what is true, what is going to happen, and what is just kind of make-believe to win some extra votes. I think people need to be very, very cautious before they vote in the ballot box, because I think better the devil you know.
What do you think about this, Nigel Nelson? Have you noticed a change in tone, a change in rhetoric and a change in policy from Starmer in recent days?
Well, what I've noticed is actually policies. We didn't have that, say, a year ago, and now they're sort of coming up on a daily basis. So that's an improvement. We'll get even more when the manifesto comes out. He's not going too far because the Tories keep nicking the ones he comes up with. So he needs to actually keep a few under wraps.
When you say policies, Nigel, do you mean U-turns? For example, rowing back on that figure of £28 billion a year for a green revolution?
Well, with the 28 billion, I regret it if he does go back on that. We're still a bit unsure about how he's going to do that. The 28 billion is important because it would create 500,000 green jobs. But there are other things out there as well, which he hasn't rowed back on. So, for instance, the idea of getting the NHS to get through its backlog by having 2 million more operations, that is a firm commitment, paid for by taxing the 26,000 non-DOMs. You will get 6,500 more teachers in schools, and that's paid for by VAT on private school fees. So there are other things out there.
I wonder if you're inflating that non-DOM income somewhat. I fear that you're cooking the books there, Nigel, because some non-DOMs could flee the country, which means lost national income and lost tax receipts.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a danger of that. At the moment, that the independent estimates, and these are put together by LSE and Warwick University, is out of the 26,000 who are here, fewer than 100 would actually leave the country. Now, clearly, if they all disappeared, this policy would not work.
Well, wait a minute, Nigel. I mean, this non-DOM tax, this is going to pay for everything, apparently, including a new frock for Mrs. Dolan.
Well, there's this constant sort of complaint that he's spending it several times over. He hasn't. The non-DOM tax, if it works as planned, will raise over £3 billion. 1.8 billion of that goes into NHS, free breakfast clubs for primary school children, and improved dentistry. That still leaves over £1 billion left. So he hasn't spent it several times over. He's used the pot to spend it on several different things.
Cool, Vera, I'm going to come back to you in one moment, but I do want to just press Nigel on this, because, Nigel, it's fair to say that you want a Labour government, and let's be honest, a Labour government is coming. I think it's my duty as a prime-time broadcaster to warn my viewers and listeners what's going to happen. Now, I have said that some of his remarks this week have been quite positive. For example, they will not reintroduce the cap on bankers' bonuses. That's going to be good for financial services. They want corporation tax as low as possible. Well done, Labour. There, I said it. You can quote me on that. But my concern is that a 100-seat majority, no problem. He can do a Blair. But if he has a narrow majority of 10 or 20 seats, the Labour Party in government will be ungovernable, Nigel Nelson.
Well, I mean, it's not looking that way at the moment anyway, if the polls are to be believed. Now, I think the polls will narrow as the election comes. But if you look at a poll from last week, that was giving the Tories 42 seats left, with Labour coming in with more than 500 MPs. I don't believe that'll be the result of the general election, because there will be a narrowing.
OK.
But those are the figures you're talking about. It's looking at the moment, unless there's a miracle, like a Labour landslide.
You're not answering my question, and that's why he's not answering my question, Culvier Ranger. He knows that if Labour have a slim majority of 10 or 20, Labour will be ungovernable. Imagine convincing John McDonnell and Rebecca Long-Bailey and, for goodness sake, Diane Abbott to sign off your legislation. They won't do it. They'll have Keir Starmer over a barrel, Corvair.
Yes, you're exactly right. And when I arrived, I was actually in quite a good mood until I heard your monologue saying that a Labour government is coming. It's not coming. There's still a choice to the British people because they still have to understand, what does Keir Starmer believe in? What does he and his Labour Party stand for? He is no Tony Blair. This is no new Labour. This is not a Labour Party that is completely changing the dynamics of what it believes in. As you are quite rightly highlighting, a lot of people in this party and who could potentially be in government were supporting, as was Keir Starmer, Jeremy Corbyn's agenda, a highly left-wing socialist agenda that had no room for growth, no real room for industry, a lot of room for spending. And when Nigel, he's doing a good job of trying to understand where the money's coming from Labour, clobbering non-doms who will be fleet of foot, clobbering hard-working families and putting VAT on independent schools. This is not going to generate the tens, if not hundreds of billions that the country needs to re-look at adult social care, to reform the NHS, to look at how we invest in the major infrastructure of our energy supplies and our transport infrastructure. Those things can't be funded by these initiatives. So how will Keir Starmer's Labour Party do it? And I'll tell you how they will do it. They will do it by taxing us more, because they can't see their pathway to growth and they don't grow the economy to deliver public services. And that's always been the Labour way.
OK, last word, Annunciata.
I think Corvair is absolutely right. But Nigel misses the point that they will, non-doms will leave in their droves. There is no question that we have an international money elite, whether we like it or not. What we want them to do is pay their taxes here, and if they become too high, they will go elsewhere. The private schools will close because middle-class parents will be priced out and they won't have enough students. What will actually happen is our houses that we cannot move will be more taxed, our wages will be more taxed, and our purchases will be more taxed. It will all fall on the normal British taxpayer, as happens every time with a Labour government.
Is it time to give Labour a chance? Let me know your thoughts. Mark at gbnews.com. But next up in the big story, after the events of this week, has Suella Braverman been proved right that multiculturalism in Britain has failed? What do you think? Let me know. I'll be asking Margaret Thatcher's former top advisor, Niall Gardner, next.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A Labour government is coming, that's fine, but it's my duty to tell you what to expect, and it's not pretty. That was the topic of my big opinion. Well, a strong reaction on email. Jax says, no, no, no to Labour. Josephine, I will absolutely not vote for Labour. Mark says, as always, socialism just makes poor people poorer. It is idealism over outcome. Alan says, when you watch Labour ministers being interviewed, they're out of their depth. I don't understand what they stand for other than criticising 14 years of Conservative government. And, my goodness, strong language from Martin, who says, bollocks to having them in again. They will balls up everything that they touch. Listen, if you'd like to throw some support in the direction of Labour, do let me know. They're streets ahead in the polls, so you could argue that Keir Starmer has made the party very electable, and they will win. Keep the opinions coming, but it's time now for the big story, and the Conservative MP for Finchley and Golders Green will step down at the next election as a result of death threats over his pro-Israel stance. Meanwhile, this weekend saw further pro-Palestine marches in which a number of protesters waved placards perceived by some as anti-Semitic. And of course, a man who entered the country illegally and was turned down for asylum twice is now on the run for an alleged chemical attack on a woman, 2 children, with 9 others injured. So has the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman been proved right that multiculturalism in Britain has failed? Let's speak to foreign policy analyst, contributor to the Daily Telegraph and former aide to Margaret Thatcher, Niall Gardner. Niall, great to see you. I think your first appearance this year on the show. Suella Braverman got dog's abuse when she made those comments a few months ago. Has she been proved right?
Mark, it's great to be here on the show. Many thanks. I do think that Suella Braverman is absolutely correct in her assessment that multiculturalism has been a huge failure. I think that Suella Braverman's remarks made several months ago are absolutely spot on. And with regard to these massive anti-Semitic protests on the streets of London, pro-terror, pro-Hamas marches, it's a clear illustration of the huge failure of multiculturalism. What you now have is a state of affairs where Jewish Britons are afraid actually to even go into central London during these marches. Multiculturalism, I think, is fundamentally un-British. It has resulted in a very divided society. It is fundamentally wrong. It should be rejected. All immigrants to the United Kingdom should integrate fully into British culture. And multiculturalism, I think, has been a far-left idea which has failed spectacularly, not only in the United Kingdom, but all over Europe as well. And so the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is 100% correct. Multiculturalism really should be, I think, thrown into the dustbin of history as an idea.
Now, Niall, like you, I've been very concerned about some of the placards that I've seen at these pro-Palestine marches. It's worth pointing out that many would argue they're on those marches because they want a ceasefire. But, of course, you're entitled to your view, and many Jewish people have been distressed by these marches. It's important to acknowledge that. But if multiculturalism has failed, Niall, can it be fixed, or is the genie out of the lamp?
Well, it can only be fixed if all immigrants are willing to integrate into British society and culture. Those who support terrorism, for example, should be deported from the country. It is absolutely unacceptable that you have large numbers of individuals from, especially from the Middle East, who have not integrated at all into British society. The Islamist threat in the United Kingdom is absolutely massive. And Islamists who openly support terror, frankly, should be put on flights out of the country. They should be deported. There should be no place for this kind of evil hatred on the streets of British cities that we're seeing right now. There should be zero tolerance for this. And the only way that Britain can succeed in the future is if everyone adheres to British culture, to British values, and is also loyal to the Crown, loyal to everything that Great Britain stands for as a wonderful nation. Those who are not loyal to what Britain stands for shouldn't be in the country. And they should be heading back to wherever they came from, frankly. And as for illegal migrants and the large numbers of those, they should, of course, all be deported from the United Kingdom, which is a key reason, of course, why the UK needs to get out of the European Convention on Human Rights, which is a supranational court that presides over British courts. It's unacceptable. British sovereignty should reign supreme.
The ECHR does not look fit for the 21st century in spite of its noble origins, Niall. Now, Niall, do stay with me. I'd love to bring in my top pundits this evening. We have Annunciata Rees-Mogg, Lord Ranger and Nigel Nelson. Kulveer, do you think that Suella Braverman has been proved right, that multiculturalism has failed?
No, I'm not one of those who thinks multiculturalism has failed. I'm a success story, I believe, of multiculturalism. I'm second generation, born in Britain. Obviously, parents came from East Africa and grandparents from India. But we became part of the country. There was a challenge, and I think for many different cultures that arrived, of ghettoisation. I think we had, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, some serious challenges in Britain about ghettoisation and whether multicultures were going to succeed. But the British dream has been shared values, fairness, and actually success for all. And that's been through economic success, cultural success, and buying into what Britain means. And I think they're the comments about where we've had now a higher level of immigration coming in. Have we enough time to share those values, to build those successes, and especially when we start seeing the numbers in both legal and illegal migration becoming challenging? So I think multiculturalism isn't a failure. I'm one of those people who'd say I'm a product of that success, but we need to see how we manage it going forward when the numbers are so high.
Annunciata, do you think that Suella Braverman's comments have aged well or badly?
Well, I think there is quite a big debate in this country about the meaning of multiculturalism, and certainly it's been criticised before by very high-profile campaigners for meaning separate communities of different cultures. And in that respect, it is a failure. Where Britain has been incredibly successful has been at integrating everyone into the British way of life, the British dream. We're not Americans. We don't go around waving flags in the same way, but there is a basic set of principles by which we want to live and we want our neighbours to share. And where that has happened, it has worked extremely well and better than any of our European neighbours by a very long way. But when multiculturalism, when it's a segregation of communities has happened, it has not worked well. And I think that's where this disparity comes in.
Nigel Nelson, ethnic tensions in Leicester and the East Midlands, an effective blasphemy law at a school in Batley in which a teacher is still on the run and in hiding, and Jews afraid to enter our capital city when pro-Palestine marches are happening. Multiculturalism, if it's not dead, it's terminal.
No, I think you've taken a number of isolated events there. I mean, the teacher you mentioned, that was because of a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad. Not to be recommended. We know what's happened in other countries.
But we don't have blasphemy laws in this country, Nigel.
No, but the whole thing is that we do have respect in this country, and I think that you have to respect the other religions which are prominent in this country, and that is Islam. So if you take that particular case, it was a huge mistake to show a cartoon of the Prophet in his school. So that is a separate case. I don't think that comes down to a multicultural problem. I agree with what's just been said, that if you walk around, say, London is a huge melting pot, it's multicultural. You don't notice the fact that all these different cultures and people from ethnic backgrounds are all mixed together. take your point in some other places. Yes, up in Leicestershire, there's been problems up north. But that is not necessarily a multicultural problem. It is more within the communities that Annunziata was talking about, where people separate.
Closing thoughts, Niall Gardner. You served as an aide to Margaret Thatcher. She was not anti-immigration, but she wouldn't be happy with how things are playing out in the 21st century.
I think Margaret Thatcher would be appalled today by what we're seeing on the streets of London. Large numbers of Islamists who are clearly supporting terrorism. Many of them are chanting anti-Semitic slogans. We also have British monuments, the Cenotaph, for example, being protected by police against these Islamists. I think she would have called for very, very strong action against these Islamist hate mobs on the streets of London and other British cities. She would have had zero tolerance for supporters of terror, and she would have ensured that those who are breaking the law, and large numbers of people are right now supporting Hamas and other Islamist terrorist movements, she would have ensured that those people would be prosecuted and where possible, deported as well.
Niall, what a treat to see you and have you back on the show. We'll catch up soon. My thanks there to
Many thanks.
A lot of things. He's a journalist, an international foreign affairs expert, and of course contributor to The Telegraph, Niall Gardner. Lots more to come. Next up, King Charles has been pictured for the first time since leaving hospital for prostate treatment. I'll get reaction from someone that knows him intimately well, former royal butler to King Charles, Grant Harold. That's next. Plus, we've been asking, has Suella Braverman been proved right? It's been a Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll. The results are in. I shall reveal all next.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
After the events of this week, has Suella Braverman been proved right that multiculturalism has failed? Well, we've been conducting an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's poll. The results are in. And 91.4% say yes, she has been proved right. Multiculturalism has failed. 5.9% say no. Now, in just 2 minutes' time, reaction to the news that King Charles has made his first public appearance since leaving hospital. We'll be speaking to former royal butler Grant Harold. But great news for my many viewers and listeners in Northern Ireland, as power sharing has finally resumed, with Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill making history by becoming the first nationalist First Minister in Stormont. In a GB News exclusive, our political editor Christopher Hope has sat down with the Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris. Take a listen.
The issues of sovereignty will ever be settled because there'll be different. I mean, there is a different view in the Labour Party, obviously, because when we were talking about this in the week in Parliament, Hilary Benn, my opposite number, articulated a bit of what Labour would like to do after the next general election and its relationship with Europe. So I think this will always be a bit of a debate. But I hope it is just a debate. I want my country to stay out of the European Union. I do think we can be better neighbours and tenants. I think we're in a really strong position. We need to make more of our Brexit dividends, but we are making progress on those two. This is the right trajectory for my country.
And unionists should be happy with this deal.
I think unionists should be both happy and comfortable with this deal, because it does come. It's as I say, it's part of a package that strengthens our union, and I think it's unfair and incorrect to say anything else.
I should have asked you when you thought you might get this deal, because the two-part sides were a long way off for a long period over the past 2 years.
Yeah, it's been an interesting. I mean, I've been Secretary of State since September 23, and I don't think many people thought this would ever happen.
Was there a moment at which you suddenly thought, what was the breakthrough moment?
I thought we had a number of breakthrough moments, but lots of them turned into false dawns. So I'd got to the point where I was actually waiting for Stormont to sit and elect a Speaker, First Minister and Deputy First Minister. So mine was yesterday.
And it's going to hold this deal. There won't be any walkouts. It's going to, the Stormont will remain in place. The executive will remain as it is now.
Yeah, I think there is a strong foundation now with a big amount of money. £3.3 billion is in this deal to transform Northern Ireland's public services, do all the union building measures that enhancing measures that we talked about, and indeed, I mean, with Northern Ireland's unique status for goods being manufactured here.
EU and UK rules.
Yeah. So essentially having privileged access to the European single market for goods and unfettered access to the UK internal market, and all the benefits from our free trade deals. I think this is going to be a great place to invest.
Great interview done by Chopper there. Tonight's interview with our political editor, Christopher Hope, is now available to view in full on the GB News YouTube channel. Now, good news. King Charles has visited church in his first public outing since receiving treatment for an enlarged prostate. The monarch waved to cameras as he attended a service with Queen Camilla at St Mary Magdalene Church in Sandringham, Norfolk, earlier today. He spent 3 nights in hospital for the treatment of an enlarged prostate. The Princess of Wales also had abdominal surgery at the same hospital. Meanwhile, an Ipsos poll taken as both royals underwent treatment saw the King and the Princess of Wales benefit from a boosted level of popularity, whilst Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, sadly sank further in the public esteem. Well, let's get reaction to King Charles's first outing since his procedure. And a man that knows him well, former royal butler Grant Harold. Grant, good to see you again. When a senior member of the royal family comes home from hospital, what kind of treatments might they expect from the royal household?
Good evening, Matt. Thank you for having me on. I'm sure that it's good to be home. Like anybody after a hospital visit, it's always nice to go home. But equally for the royal family to return home, you can imagine that the Queen would have been thrilled to actually have him back. And I also kind of wonder that, you know, whether in hospital, obviously he hasn't kind of got the same kind of, he's got different people looking after him, but I'm sure even members of the household will be glad to have him home as well. Because I think I've said to you before, Matt, that when you're in a role such as I was, you do to an extent become close to them, and when they're not well, it does concern you, you know, like it does with everybody within the household.
Well, most definitely. How hard will it be to encourage King Charles, a famous workaholic, to take things easy?
not very easy, Mark. I know, as I'm sure you do, that he doesn't like to kind of stop. He is one of the hardest working people that I have ever met. I think I've said to people on occasions, I remember in the morning kind of going in to start my duties, and he was already working and going to bed in the evening, and he was still working. So, you know, this is somebody that literally works every hour that he can. And I think without any doubt, even in hospital, he would have continued working. And even though he's home, he might be resting. Again, he's not going to stop getting on with the business of being monarch. He's still going to carry on doing the duties that he's supposed to an extent, because obviously he is also supposed to rest.
Princess Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had a longer stay in Hospital Grant and will likely be out of action until after Easter. This is a big loss for the royal family, isn't it?
It is, and I see that it's also been noted that Prince William has also, at the moment, stepped back from duties. And the reality is, you know, people kind of think that there's people like myself to look after the family, and to an extent there is, but William and Catherine are very much the kind of people that do their own thing and look after themselves. And without any question, Prince William will be the one there waiting on her hand and foot and looking after her and making sure that she's getting better, which is why he would have stepped back from public duties as well. And it's been noted that the Queen Camilla, has been the kind of most senior, obviously, member of the royal family carrying out duties. In fact, she's been kind of racing around the country. I think she was in Bath, which was obviously local to us, the other day. You know, she hasn't kind of stopped. If anything, she's kind of gone up a notch or a couple of notches, because she's having to carry out duties on behalf of those other royals as well.
Grant, I wish we had longer, but it's always a treat to have you on the show. We'll catch up soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark.
My thanks there to former royal butler Grant Harold. Coming up in my Take at 10, a convicted criminal and illegal immigrant suspected of a chemical attack still on the run. Proof, if you needed it, that Britain's asylum system is utterly broken. But next up, my Mark Meets guest fell victim to a kidnap by a human trafficking and organ harvesting gang. She was 17. She survived. She tells her incredible story next.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels we're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, lots to get through, but first, Mark meets. At just 17 years of age, my Mark Meets guest fell victim to a kidnap by a human trafficking and organ harvesting gang, threatening torture and sexual abuse. At one point, she was placed in solitary confinement, locked up in a dark, small room for 6 months, with the threat that she would be killed and her organs taken. Well, she survived to tell the story. She now has a successful career as a motivational speaker and advisor to businesses and individuals on how to overcome obstacles in life and achieve a positive mindset. Well, if she can achieve a positive mindset, anyone can. Her book about her experience is called Unbroken: Surviving Human Trafficking, and it's out now. Lorata Lyon, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, Mark. It's a privilege.
Well, it's a privilege for us to have you. You were a small child when war broke out in the former Yugoslavia.
That's right.
Your hometown was singled out for ethnic cleansing by the Serb army. You were separated from your parents and forced to flee. How old were you when that happened?
When this all happened, when I fled for my life, I was around 17.
OK, so that's when you were 17. And what happened is you found yourself alone on the streets of Pristina,
correct,
which is the capital of Kosovo. You were rescued briefly by the UN, by 2 UN workers, but then you were kidnapped after that.
Yeah, I was taken just outside of their apartment because they were giving shelter to me because they didn't want to hand me over to the Red Cross.
Yeah.
Because the Red Cross in Kosovo was being run by some of the people I think were as dodgy as the ones that took me.
Really? So during this war, you couldn't trust the Red Cross?
It wasn't the Red Cross itself. I think it was the people that were running that particular... Well, not me, I didn't know this, but the police officers that took me under their wings, the 2 Americans, which are my friends still, they didn't want to hand me over to the Red Cross as a refugee from Serbia crossing borders to Kosovo.
Because they were worried about who was
Yes.
managing that venue. That's astonishing. And so you were taken. Tell me about your kidnappers. Who were they?
As I mentioned in the book, I haven't mentioned their names because I don't want to start a war.
But do we know what their motivations were at the time? Because they lied about who they were.
Yeah, of course. They pretend good people, but they are not. And everybody puts a blind eye into these gang because they are very, very dangerous and still alive, still at large, although they've been arrested many times over. They were due to appear in Hague. Their motive was human trafficking for sex exploitation and then organ harvesting.
So really, their activities were not political. It was financial. This was a criminal business enterprise.
Yeah.
And so what did they threaten to do to you, Lorata?
Well, they had sold me to the highest bidder, and I was supposed to be handed over to whoever bought me, but luck had it that the plan didn't go that way, and so therefore I managed to escape them. And
so you were sold?
I was sold to the highest bidder.
And can you tell me what your emotions were when this was happening?
I mean, I was with them for quite some time. They groomed me first. I was a virgin young girl, and so they realised I've never had any experience in that field, so they had to groom me. I was made to watch a lot of disgusting things, and besides that, I saw other girls being abused as a result of me being taught. And for me, that haunts me still, what I witnessed on those weeks.
And obviously, you suffered mental torture and imprisonment and great fear. Were you physically harmed?
I was. I got raped daily for 6 months, and yeah, I got scarred, and I mean, I was unrecognisable.
How have you gone about rebuilding your life after these appalling crimes?
It was tough initially. I mean, I got to the UK as a political child refugee, and I'm grateful to the British government for giving me the chance to regain my strength and chance to be alive again. And so I respected the rules. I went just as the country wanted me to be, you know, followed the doctors and this and that. learn the language from scratch.
Which you speak with perfection.
Oh yeah, how's my English?
I've had guests. I've had guests tonight with worse English.
Oh no, I don't believe that.
Well, of course, and the whole point is that you now speak for a living because you've taken the horrors that you went through and you now inspire other people to overcome obstacles and to change your mindset. How did you do that, and how can other people change their mindset?
Well, his mindset is consistency of choosing to think otherwise. So if you wake up in the morning and you are feeling, oh, it's a bad weather, whatever, don't let the weather dictate how you feel because you're forever imprisoned by what the weather is going to do. So these are little simple things, but obviously it's a lot deeper than that. For me, it was writing the book and just cathartic, just do something other than feel sorry for yourself, whatever that makes you feel good, whether going for a walk, spending time with your dog, going to the gym, you know, there's various of things you can do. But I always say is just please don't feel sorry for yourself, because once you feel sorry for yourself, you ultimately make yourself a victim.
And actually, this is the problem in the modern world, is there's quite a lot of victim mentality and the sort of weaponisation of being a victim in modern society. It seems like everyone's got something that they're a victim about, and I guess you think that's not going to help us.
It won't help us with the media the way it is, and even I have gotten loads of abuse because I'm speaking out and I'm like, what is it that I'm doing wrong? I'm just trying to raise awareness.
Where did you get abuse from?
Well, you just get it, don't you, in the social media? But I see it and now I'm like, you know what, I've been through so much. There is nothing you could say or do that would actually stop me from doing the right thing.
What kind of person would attack you
I know,
for telling a story of kidnap and torture? But it's happened.
It happens, so I can completely really relate to people that get daily abused in any way, shape or form, that they can also feel a victim as such. But for me, I think I've got really thick skin now, and I honestly, my main mission is to save as many kids out there. That human trafficking is huge business. Huge. And also just inspire people to see the value that they have within the family, within the job, and not to be overreactive, of just be grateful for what you have.
Has it been hard for you to trust other people now and have relationships?
Intimate relationship took me quite some time to regain that kind of level of intimacy, but I'm grateful I managed to get there, and I've got children. But when I meet people, I don't judge anyone straight away. I give them the benefit of the doubt, and because I am so sort of charged and sort of I've seen it all from different levels, kind of life taught me so much experience. I soon can tell whether someone is genuine or not, and I will not be rude. I will just choose to sort of distance myself a little bit.
Briefly, only a couple of seconds to go. What's your attitude to the appalling, evil people that abused you in this way and imprisoned you? What's your view of them now?
I feel sorry for what they were capable of doing. I think that something bad must have happened to them that they were able to treat me like that. But I think they need to be stopped, to be honest.
Well, they should be in a jail and throw away the key. Lorata, you're a fabulous person, and it's been a thrill to speak to you. And I guarantee my audience are just blown away by what they've heard. I just know that because I know my viewers and listeners. Let's have a look at the book. It is called Unbroken: Surviving Human Trafficking. It's by Lorata Lyon, a must-read. And her website, LorataLyon.com. Find out about her brilliant motivational speaking business. Do come back and see us again soon.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Coming up in the 10 o'clock hour, tomorrow's papers, and in my take at 10, a convicted criminal and illegal immigrant suspected of a chemical attack still on the run. Proof, if you needed it, our asylum system is broken. That's next.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. If you remember what weather conditions you had on Sunday, you'll probably see very similar conditions on Monday as we start off the new week. Systems are very slow moving at the moment, high pressure situated towards the south, but this weather front has become stalled across areas of Scotland and will provide very persistent rainfall across particularly western districts, the Highlands, Argyll and Bute as we head throughout the night. A rain warning is enforced and some flooding and disruption is possible. Elsewhere, a reasonably cloudy night. There's some some clearer spell developing through central areas at times. Mild for all of us though, temperatures not dropping much lower than 9 or 7 degrees Celsius. A chillier start to the new week for the far north of Scotland though, with a touch of frost. And as this rain band just pushes ever so slightly northwards into the cold air ahead of it, we could see a touch of snow for the likes of Caithness, Sutherland, even to lower levels for a time. But that rain will really be persistent across western areas, and it's going to provide a very miserable and wet day here. Again, relatively blustery and cloudy for most other areas. Some patches of drizzle to watch out for, mist and murk around coastal districts. Temperatures a touch down compared to the weekend, around 9 to 12 degrees Celsius. On Tuesday, that rain band will eventually push its way slightly further southward, so moving into Northern Ireland, Northern England, a bit of mountain snow possible here as well. To the south, you hold on to that mild, cloudy, blustery theme, but to the north, we open up the doors to something a touch brighter, with some snow showers, but also colder. And those colder conditions are slowly going to push their way across other areas of the UK throughout the forthcoming week. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good evening, it's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, a convicted criminal and illegal immigrant suspected of a chemical attack, still on the run. Proof, if you needed it, that Britain's asylum system is utterly broken. As our ex-Prime Minister starts a new movement called the Popular Conservatives with the support of one Nigel Farage, can Liz Truss unite the right? And Brexit 4 years on. Was it worth it? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits. Yes, indeed, a packed show, lots to get through. But first, the news headlines and Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. Our top stories tonight. The Prime Minister has urged the newly restored power-sharing executive in Northern Ireland to focus on, quote, delivering for families and businesses. Rishi Sunak was visiting air ambulance crews in Lisbon ahead of a meeting at Stormont with First Minister Michelle O'Neill and Deputy Emma Little-Pengelly on Monday. The institutions were restored after a deal between Mr Sunak's government and the DUP to allay unionist concerns over post-Brexit trading arrangements. Mr Sunak described money provided by the government as part of the return package as generous.
The deal that we negotiated last year, £3.3 billion, represents a generous and fair settlement for Northern Ireland, and crucially, it is sustainable, and it's about ensuring that public finances in Northern Ireland are sustainable for the long term. That's the approach that we've taken that I think will really benefit everyone here. And now that we've got the executive back up and running, it's right that people have their local politicians focusing on their priorities, starting with public services. There hasn't been devolved government up and running here for far too long, but now we do have it, and they can start focusing on delivering for everyone.
Well, the Northern Ireland Secretary has told GB News that many people thought the new deal would never happen after power sharing was restored. Chris Heaton-Harris told political editor Chris Hope it solves many of the problems surrounding the border in the Irish Sea.
I think there is a strong foundation now with a strong amount, with a big amount of money, £3.3 billion is in this deal to transform Northern Ireland's public services, do all the union building measures that we, enhancing measures that we talked about, and indeed, I mean, with Northern Ireland's unique status for goods being manufactured here.
The Prime Minister has defended UK airstrikes in Yemen, saying the Houthis' illegal campaign in the Red Sea is having economic consequences. Earlier, Lord Cameron urged the Iran-backed group to stop their, quote, reckless attacks on shipping. There have been fears that it could drive up the price of goods as cargo firms are forced to take longer but safer routes. Last night, 36 sites across 13 locations were targeted by coalition forces in Yemen. A £20,000 reward is being offered for information that may lead to the arrest of a suspected chemical attacker. New video has been released of Abdul Azadi in a Tesco store in North London on Wednesday. Police say his last known movements show that he left Tower Hill Tube Station in the East End just after 9:30 that evening. That was after a woman who was known to Azadi and her 2 children were attacked. Forensic tests have shown that a concentrated corrosive substance was used, either liquid sodium hydroxide or carbonate. Well, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, back to Mark.
My good friend Ray Addison returns in an hour's time. Welcome to a busy Mark Dolan tonight. As our ex-Prime Minister starts a new movement called the Popular Conservatives, that's a novel idea, and with the support of Nigel Farage, can Liz Truss unite the right? And Brexit 4 years on, was it worth it? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe. Plus tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits. Former MEP Annunciata Rees-Mogg, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and former advisor to Boris Johnson, although he keeps that quiet these days, Lord Colville Ranger. Plus, they'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros. A packed hour, and those papers are coming. But first, my take at 10. The chaos of Britain's asylum system is either incompetence, corruption, or a plan. No doubt the truth is a mixture of the three. Let me just bring you up to speed on this crazy story, which represents everything that's wrong with this country, and why a failure to properly manage our borders is a national disgrace, a national crisis, and a national emergency. It has come to light that Abdul Azaidi, the man police are still hunting over a suspected chemical attack which injured 12 people, entered the UK illegally in 2016, applied for asylum twice, didn't get it, but was not removed from the country. Why? He then committed sexual assault and indecent exposure, receiving a suspended sentence. Why? Is sexual assault not a bad thing anymore? Amazingly, he was then granted asylum. Why? 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 Well, on that one, we have an answer, because, of course, his claim was that he converted to Christianity, something which is now disputed. The Telegraph report that friends admit Azaidi remained a devout Muslim, telling the shopkeeper at his favourite Middle Eastern food store, where he bought halal meat, a famous Christian staple, that he managed and hoped to return to Afghanistan one day to find a wife. This guy's litany of hellish misdemeanours were all prior to his alleged chemical attack on 2 children, a mother and 9 others on Wednesday. It was a horrific attack, it was deeply chilling, it was violent, and life-changing injuries were involved. We've talked in the past about the mystery of why a sophisticated country like Britain can't police its borders and stop people entering the country illegally. But perhaps more egregious is the fact that when people come here and break the law, they get to stay. Ultimately, blame lies with lawyers who quite literally help people that shouldn't be here to game the system and remain. Some people call them lefty lawyers. I call them misguided, unethical and borderline corrupt lawyers. Numpty priests at the Church of England shared the blame as well, facilitating these religious conversions, which in so many cases are done exclusively out of the desire to remain in the country, rather than some kind of Damascene conversion to Jesus Christ. Are the priests that facilitate these phony conversions under the leadership of Archbishop Welby, who's blocking the Rwanda plan, are they just gullible and naive, or are they rigging the system out of some bizarre woke idea of open borders and all are welcome, including lawbreakers? You tell me. I'm disgusted by this story, not just in regard to the individual case and the poor victims, but the fact that it's obviously the tip of the iceberg. If only this was a freak incident. Now, there are some prominent broadcasters and politicians who claim the asylum status of this monster is irrelevant. Well, no, it's not, because if he'd been deported in the first place, he wouldn't have committed those crimes. The problem you've got is that the institutions of this country don't really believe in proper border control and a robust asylum system which is unwelcoming to criminals. The Home Office, the Church of England, parts of the media, scores of politicians, the legal establishment, custodians of misguided and outdated human rights laws, well, this terrible crime is on them. The establishment as a whole are conniving to make our country a more divided and dangerous place to live, with illegal migration in the tens of thousands every year, and we have no idea who these people are and what their background is. And with legal net migration of approaching 700,000 in a year, we're witnessing the torching of Western values and of social cohesion as we speak. It's happening in real time before our very eyes. And for those half asleep, this story should open them. Now, immigration is a huge value to this country, and it always has been. I am the son of Irish immigrant parents myself. But it needs to be legal. It needs to be coherent and robust, and we need a national conversation about the current scale. The last word goes to my former colleague here at GBNews, the brilliant Mercy Muroki, who, writing in The Sun this week, said the idea that you can lump people from all around the world together on a small island and everyone's going to sit around the fire holding hands and singing Kumbaya is mindless nonsense. She goes on, what causes racial tensions is turning a blind eye to people who refuse to integrate into the country. She's so right. And I would controversially suggest that breaking the law is a failure to integrate. If you are refused asylum, you should be removed. Is that controversial? If you enter the country illegally, you should be removed. Is that controversial? If you break the law when you're in this country, you should be removed. Is that controversial? Well, yes, it is controversial. which is why we're in such deep trouble. Britain is turning into an insane asylum. Your reaction, mark@gbnews.com. I'll get to your emails shortly, but first, my top pundits. Former MEP Annunziata Rees-Mogg, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Coulvier Ranger. Nigel, I'm really worried about this story. This chap is still on the run, but I worry that his absence from the long arm of the law is reflective of a wider and deeper problem.
Well, that's what we don't know. I mean, there's an awful lot about this case that still is a bit of a mystery. The Home Office certainly has questions to answer. First of all, why was his asylum application turned down twice in the first place? Whether or not this conversion to Christianity, whether real or imagined, was the reason he got asylum the third time, we don't know that. No one said so. There was a story this morning in the Sunday Mirror which said that there's no record in Newcastle diocese where he lived that anybody facilitated his asylum claim. So there's an awful lot of mystery here. Now, when it comes down to the criminal charge, in 2018, had he been sent to prison for a year, he could have gone back to Afghanistan. Now we have no returns agreement with the Taliban, so that would make it much more difficult. But this is one case. It doesn't show the entire system has broken down. It shows the system broke down in this individual case.
OK, well, Annunziata, are you reassured there by Nigel's words?
No, I think these problems are clearly endemic and systematic across all our institutions, that we have an awful lot of well-meaning lefties who think that everyone deserves to live in our wonderful country. The reality is we can't take everyone, but we should not be taking criminals. If you arrive here illegally, you are already a criminal. If you go on to break our laws, you are a criminal twice over. Should we be granting you asylum? Never.
However, if you enter the country illegally and you're fleeing for your life, ought we not to show compassion on Annunziata?
We should absolutely have a system whereby you can claim asylum without breaking the law to get here. But the matter is, he came in on the back of a lorry, hidden, illegally, and he was clearly intending from the very start to break our laws. He should never have been allowed to stay.
Annunziata, can I ask you a personal question?
Yes.
Are you a practicing Christian?
Yes.
What's your reaction to the news that many individuals who seek to remain in the country are converting to Christianity, not all of them in good faith?
My faith is as a Catholic, and I think you should ask Anne Widdecombe the process she had to go to, which happened to be in my local parish church, in order to convert to Catholicism. It is by no means easy. It is not turn up and say, hello, I'm a Catholic, I quite like your God or something. It's a very rigorous process, and she would be able to go into the details. I happen to have been born as one, so I didn't have to convert. But I think these things should be taken very seriously. I think everyone's religion is personal.
Do you think that the Church of England have been asleep at the wheel on this one, either conned or even complicit themselves, some of the clerics involved?
I wouldn't blame the Church of England on this, but I would blame an awful lot of do-gooders who believe they can save the world and that they can save it one person at a time, erroneously offering succour to criminals who then go on to harm people in this country.
Coulvier, this is an isolated case, nothing to see here.
No, not at all, and I agree a lot with what Annunziata has been saying. And the other point to make here is that this individual and many others are coming from safe countries to here. They're already in a safe country when they're deciding to make that journey here. So we have to question why that is happening. But Mark, in your Take It 10, you could almost be making your case for being Home Secretary, a hard-line Home Secretary, some would consider it. But every time we've had Home Secretaries, we've tried to take the system to task. You also mentioned, is it corruption? Is it incompetency? It's more the competency that's the challenge here, but a competency of policies as well. We've had numerous policies that have looked at this, which is left legal loopholes open left, right and centre for, as Annunziata said, well-meaning people, well-meaning lawyers to get involved. But actually what we need to see is the impact on the streets, in our towns and villages. I want more people to go and have a look at what the impact of this level of immigration and illegal immigration is having on the streets of Britain. This is not a one-off incident. We hear about these things, we see these things. In this tragic case, it's all over our news and the airwaves because obviously how it has played out and the unfortunate thing that's happened with the young children and the other people involved. But we must do something about this. It's a wake-up call for us.
My brilliant pundits return at 10:30 sharp with tomorrow's papers. Your reaction, Mark, at gbnews.com. But next up, as our ex-Prime Minister starts a new movement called the Popular Conservatives with the support of one Nigel Farage, can Liz Truss unite the right? And Brexit 4 years on, was it worth it? I'll be asking former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe next.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a strong reaction to my take at 10. We've got a crisis in the country. Our borders are porous, and we have somebody that applied for asylum twice and failed, remained in the country, and is now at large, having committed a sexual assault and an alleged chemical attack. What a mess. Well, Chris says, Mark, I totally agree with you. We need a real leader who'll stand up, do what they're supposed to do, and not keep giving in to the woke do-gooders who are ruining what was once a great country. Kevin says, thank you for your views on the current situation, Mark, regarding immigration. You're absolutely right. Sadly, the powers that be are weak with no spine. They rule us through fear, using money and inflation. The left has infiltrated our schools and universities and teachers, and the teachers are teaching our kids to be snowflakes. Please keep sharing your views. Paul says, hi, Mark, we should never be prepared to accept asylum applications from people who have deliberately ditched identification documents and thrown away their phones. And calling back to our earlier conversation about multiculturalism, has Suella Braverman been proved right that it's not working? Well, this from Sarah, who says, "Hi, Mark, I disagree that multiculturalism has failed. That's not the case, and it's also unfairly grouping together all of the non-UK cultures, which is factually wrong, as most cultures and religions are very different to each other." Thank you for that. It's a long and very absorbing email. I wish I had time for the whole thing, but Sarah, thank you for offering your views. Lots more to come. The paper's at 10:30. But first up, the former Prime Minister Liz Truss has launched a new movement called Popular Conservatism, or PopCons, which will be a platform to lobby for stricter rules on immigration, to dial down wokery in our public institutions, to take a more robust approach to law and order, and to push for lower taxes. Truss launches the event on Tuesday, and whilst it will attract serving MPs from the right of the Tory party, Reform UK's President, GBNews star Nigel Farage, will also be in attendance. So are Farage and Truss the dream team to reunite the right? Let's ask tonight's newsmaker, former government minister and Reform UK supporter Anne Widdecombe. Anne, good to see you again. What's your initial reaction to Liz Truss's project? Will you be there?
I most certainly will not be there. And my reaction to the announcement was another group, you know, and another version of the ERG, perhaps another version of any of the groups that the Conservative Party have managed to pit against each other during the last 4 years. This is just proof of more division in the Conservative Party, that somebody feels they have to set up a group in order to oppose what is going on at the moment. So that is the first thing. The second thing is Nigel isn't speaking. Nigel isn't setting this group up. Nigel will be there to observe, but I think he's doing a rather splendid job of showing what the divisions in the Tory party are. And if you haven't got a united party, you haven't got a hope in the general election, because the public absolutely hate disunity.
Anne, you were a lifelong Conservative and a serving MP, a government minister, very loyal to the cause. You left the party with a heavy heart. Why have the Conservatives ceased to be Conservative?
If I knew that, I'd have the answer to a question which many people, decades-long Conservatives, have been asking. I think the real problem is, straightforwardly, the second-rate nature of Parliament. That goes right across it. It's not just Tories. People who panic. I mean, as soon as you get a movement in the polls, they go into a panic. They panic when something goes wrong. And very, very second rate. And, you know, to believe that you solve every problem by getting rid of your leader as often as you change your socks is just indicative of the very low grade of parliamentarian that we've got at the moment. And that in turn goes back to the focus on identity politics. Instead of looking at merit, what they're looking for is more women, more gays, more ethnics, more this, more that. Fine, let's have more of those. But only after they've passed the merit bar. And I've seen it happen in a selection where the merit bar was just discarded and all that mattered was the numbers on the shortlist. Now, that is a nonsense. And over time, with both main parties doing that, it's had a huge impact on the quality of parliamentarian, a huge impact.
And is it conceivable that the likes of Liz Truss, or perhaps Lee Anderson, who'll be at the event on Tuesday as well, could ultimately defect to Reform UK, particularly if the Conservatives collapse at the next election?
Well, those who share our ideals are most welcome. And I'm sure we would be delighted to receive them. But at the moment, Reform is going ahead on its own strength, doing very nicely. Thank you. We're at 13% in the polls. We're not about to
be yet another... Sorry to interrupt you. Anne, sorry to interrupt you. You know these top Tories well. Could they stomach a move to Reform UK? Is that something, you know, could there be a brain drain from sort of some of these top Tories to Reform if it looks like the Tories are toast? Is that conceivable that someone like Liz Truss would cross the floor and essentially, you know, effectively an independent, I suppose, but standing as a Reform UK MP?
Right, I don't think there'll be a brain drain. There could well be a common sense drain if people really think, you know, that's the end and they're looking for somewhere to go which is founded on common sense. then it's possible. But at the moment, I'm not speculating like that. I'm not vesting any hope in the Conservatives. I'm vesting all my hope in reform, of which, of course, Nigel Farage is president.
Anne, I know you have reservations about its execution and outcome, but 4 years on from Brexit, we're out. Was it worth it?
Oh, it was certainly worth it, but you're quite right. We haven't, taken the advantage of it that we should have taken. And, everybody would be cheering it to the rafters if only we had done that. When I say we, I mean we, Britain. And we haven't done that. And, we've still got thousands of EU regulations on anything from green bananas to fishing vessels. We took 4 years to abolish live animal exports, which we could have done in 6 months, quite honestly. We just haven't taken advantage. Where we have taken advantage and where we're doing actually rather well is on the trade deals. That Pacific trade deal is well worth having in terms of the global market. So we've done very well on the trade deals. We did immensely well on the vaccinations, and we just, didn't participate in the procurement program, set up our own. Boris did that very, very effectively. So, yes, I'm delighted that we did it, but frustrated that we haven't taken full advantage of it.
Well, there you go, Anne. I think we'll file Brexit under work in progress. You, however, are the finished article, and Anne, we'll see you in a week's time.
See you then.
My thanks to former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe. Next up, tomorrow's papers. Don't go anywhere.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Folks, welcome back. It's time now for this. That's right, we've got tomorrow's... We've got The Independent here. Ghislaine Maxwell's brother, new evidence should free my sister. Daily Express, banned dogs kill amazing grandmother. This poor woman was 68 years of age, visiting her grandson's house, and appears to have died at the hands of 2 dogs, reportedly the banned XL Bully breed. King smiles and waves in first public outing since treatment is the other good news story in The Express. The Guardian, US says airstrikes on Iran-linked militias are just the beginning. Labour Act will cover race pay equality. And Horizon, why I'm still fighting the post office, says one of its victims. The I newspaper, Hunt expected to bolster Red Sea military power in budget defence spending boost. Metro, Gran killed by XL bullies that she warned about, her worst nightmare. A devoted grandmother was savaged to death during a family visit by 2 suspected XL bully dogs that she warned were dangerous. Esther Martin, who was 68, was spending a weekend with her 11-year-old grandson when she was attacked by the animals, said to be called Beauty and Bear, and owned by the boy's drill rapper dad, Ashley Warren. The Sun now. And let's have a look at this. Wow, quite a result for Arsenal. Arsenal 3, Liverpool 1. Cop Guns is the headline. And exclusive balloon addict, Prem ace in rehab for party gas. A Premier League star has become the first footballer to go to rehab for an addiction to laughing gas. He was admitted to a medical centre after his family asked his club for help. OK, let's have a look. We've got the Star now. And bonkers Britain. Well, we know that, don't we? 3 seasons in 1 week. Britain's bonkers weather will see 3 seasons in a week as balmy spring temperatures turn to autumnal rains and a wintry weekend. There you go. So bring a brolly and a T-shirt. Lovely. And last but not least, before we get to our People's Poll, have we got the Daily Mail or should we come back to that? We can come back to the Mail if you like. OK, let's have a look at the Mail. And they are leading with Brianna's mum, limit phones for under 16s. The mother of murdered teenager Brianna Gay said tonight that her daughter would still be alive if children were better protected from the wild west of the web. In an emotional interview, the grieving mother called for new legislation to help parents control what their children can access online through smartphones. And what the King told me about his Gordonston school days and why the Crown got it wrong. That's Ingrid Seward, who is a fantastic royal author and a regular on the show, with her new book about King Charles. And there he is, photographed, seen out and about since his first op, on his way to church, and we wish our noble monarch a speedy recovery. There you go. Hopefully that gets me a knighthood or a CBE or something like that. I'll just take a letter of thanks, that's fine. Now listen, folks, let's get reaction to all of that. But before we do, we've been conducting an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll. We've been asking, 4 years on from Brexit, was it worth it? The results are in. And yes, 74% say yes and 26% say no. OK, let's get reaction to all the big stories of the day from my top pundits. I'm delighted to have Annunciata Rees-Mogg, Lord Colville Ranger and Nigel Nelson. OK, Annunciata, can I just get a quick hot-off-the-press reaction from you to that Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll? We've been asking, 4 years on from Brexit, was it worth it? That's a handsome majority. Over 75% of our viewers and listeners are quite happy that we're out rather than in.
Well, I'm not surprised that the GB News viewers are incredibly wise. We are far better off out. We can make decisions for ourselves. If we don't like a government, we can kick them out and put in a new one, and we can change things for the better. Things are already changing for the better. We're outgunning Germany, etc., and we can make it better again. I agree with your viewers.
Colville, it ain't perfect, this Brexit, but actually the Eurozone's got its problems. Germany's been in recession. There's a massive sovereign debt crisis looming. There are issues with illegal immigration on the continent which dwarf our problems. Better out than in?
Yes, and look, your viewers are making the case of what they're seeing that's happened over the last 4 years. Obviously, we remember we went through the COVID challenge. We've seen war in Ukraine. in those international challenges, Britain has stood on its own 2 feet in a global environment and led the way in different ways, obviously with the vaccine, and how Boris Johnson, yes, led the way for the international community to stand with Ukraine. That was not the EU doing this. So our independence has enabled us to do this, and I think we're seeing those problems further. But the problem of immigration is across all of Europe. Europe as an institution, as a governing function, is failing to deal with the problem of immigration across all its borders. So we don't see any answers there.
No. Nigel Nelson, I voted Remain in 2016, but instantly accepted the result. And I cannot find this Brexit disaster.
No, and I didn't think there would be one when it happened.
You didn't indulge in Project Fear yourself?
No, I objected to Project Fear as much as I objected to the Vote Leave lies that were being told. I mean, they were both appalling campaigns. If you voted for Brexit for sovereignty, you got what you want. I voted Remain because I thought the cost of that was too high. And so we're now paying the price in higher food prices, which we wouldn't have had without Brexit.
That's contested, isn't it? Because food price inflation 6 months ago was higher in Germany.
Yes, but if you look at British food price inflation since 2019, it's gone up 25%. Of that 25%, 8% is down to Brexit. We'll probably have even more food inflation with the new rules coming in. So my own personal view is that the economy should have taken precedence. So I didn't think the price was one worth paying.
Can I just say on that point, though, we are still only 4 years in. We are seeing trade deals come into play that will, over a period of Brexit is not something that we can, draw a line at 4 years, 2 years.
But
it will be a
your old boss told us about oven-ready deals that haven't materialised.
Some of those have. What's been going on in Europe in the last week or few weeks with the farmers blocking entire cities?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Because they don't want free trade deals, because they don't want competition, because they don't want excess environmental regulation that means they can't make their own food. Yep. This is exactly what we've escaped.
Well, I don't think we've ever had sort of the French farmer strike-type system over in this country, where we have London being blocked or whatever.
We've had German farmers and Dutch as well.
Yes, I know, but we haven't had that sort of thing in this country. We're talking about what happened here, and all I'm saying is that we're balancing...
in such a bad situation as they are, because we are not imposing these impossible regulations.
But we've never had the kind of strikes they've had in
all
France.
These uncompetitive deals on our people, our farmers, our businesses, because we are operating for one country, this country, our situation, and they are having to mix up and match.
But you're talking about the idea of sovereignty, which was the right reason to do it. Yeah, I mean, going back to the original question, that at the time when the referendum was being held, I didn't think Brexit would be a disaster. I never thought it would be a huge success either, and that's where we seem to be. It's not a great success.
No, we've got more to make of it. But it has not been the economic failure that we were told it would be. This certainly hasn't been the disaster. If anything, we're doing better than our closest competitor, Germany, and we will keep doing better as we open up more.
For it, but we avoided recession for the whole of last year, which is not the case for the Eurozone and Germany. You've got unemployment higher in France, double in France to what it is in the UK. What about the weak economic situation on the continent? I don't look with envy at what's happening across the Channel.
No, and nor do I. And you've got to separate those things out. It's the various costs that Brexit brought us. So, for instance, we're going to see wages a little bit less. You probably won't notice, but the wages you get will be a little bit less as we lead up to 2030 because of Brexit. We've not been able to control our borders quite clearly, so the idea that Brexit was going to deliver that was a complete myth. There have been extra little costs that we find. If you go to Europe now, our credit cards are no longer capped, so you're paying extra when you go on holiday. All these things amount to... They're not huge. That's not a cost to the British nation. Going on holiday doesn't cost the British taxpayer. That is your personal choice. It does for the taxpayer going on holiday. So the point I'm making was, individually, we are not better off.
Wages that we will make of it what we want to make.
Wages will go up with fewer EU workers coming to the UK. I mean, there was a hotel group based in the UK that was complaining about having to pay higher wages because of Brexit, and that was the promise of Brexit.
And we were going to become a high wage, high economic economy. That was the point.
But we then sucked in other workers because we don't have the EU workers here.
But the main point, Nigel, I'll agree with you, is people wanted sovereignty. Whatever problem that we face, whatever problem we face, whether economic, social, we want to make those decisions and deal with them.
Brexit achieved that. Brexit achieved that, certainly. I accept that. Yeah. And so it's a personal thing that I respect anyone who voted for Brexit, for British sovereignty. I didn't think it was worth the economic price that we would eventually pay. So that's where we differ.
Eventually, over what period do you see that as eventually? Because I can tell you that we're not. You know, we are benefiting. We will benefit with further trade deals that we see coming in. We will have our, our transactional relationships. We've already got them in place now with Australia, with 80, 90 different trade deals.
We'll probably get them within,
So it's about what period of time do you see Brexit failing on economically, to which point does it flip over?
I think it failed from the moment that we left Europe 4 years ago, and it will continue through into the 2030s.
So, just on that, I'll just add on that point then. How can you say that? Because we all know the global economy was affected so heavily by what COVID did. And we've all suffered, obviously, every national economy stuff. So to say that Brexit, the impact of Brexit can be seen clearly because COVID has masked all of
No, I agree with that. That's the other problem, that a lot of the things that happened that may well have been down to Brexit were completely masked by COVID. So, for instance, 16,000 European lorry drivers left this country. That's why we had holes on our shelves around about COVID time. What we don't know is, did they go because of Brexit, or did they go to be home with their families because of a pandemic?
Holes at the shelves at your local Waitrose, OK, in the leafy part of London where you live. But most people had no problem getting goods, and they've not had a problem since Brexit.
And actually, they did in Brussels, they did in Paris. It was a Europe-wide problem, not just here. I am really, really fed up with the Remain lobby continuously blaming every single problem on Brexit.
But no, that's
when
not fair.
actually we are doing better than any of our
It's not every problem. I'm arguing that there are a number of problems from it.
We are confounding the expectations of the IMF and the rest.
We had the fastest growth in the G7. And also, after the ONS corrected their wrong figures about UK output, it turns out that we rebounded very strongly from the pandemic too.
We did, and this is all because we could make our own way, make our own decisions and make our own deals. And had we been trapped by European rules, we would be a lot worse.
Nigel, briefly, because I'm going to move on, but last word to you.
Just simply that you can't say that Brexit did all those wonderful things any more than a Remainer can say Brexit has been a disaster.
But you say it all the time.
No, I don't, because I don't think Brexit is a disaster. Okay. I'm just saying it's not the great success that Brexiteers claim for.
There you go. Well, it's one thing's for sure. We'll be talking about Brexit till kingdom come, won't we, Corvin? I'm going to take
please no.
A more sobering subject and a devastating tragedy, and this is a grandmother, aged 68, visiting her grandson, and appears to have died at the hands of two reportedly banned XL bully breeds. Now, I don't have the detail, cannot confirm that was the breed of the dog, but clearly two dogs strong enough to kill a 68-year-old woman. We've got a problem here, haven't we?
We have a problem. It's a tragedy, and we've heard a number of these things happen with the attacks, but my concern is that we're focusing on the dogs and not the owners, not the breeders, not the people who are taking advantage of these animals. Yes, we've got to do something about the dogs, but I remember when I was younger, I think it was Alsatians that were sort of in the crosshairs at that point. They were the dogs that were the dangerous. Rottweilers were at some point. There's always a dangerous dog that we're all pointing at, and to say it's that dog's fault. Now, I hear a lot, we are a nation of dog lovers. And a lot of owners have these types of dogs, staffies and others, who are seen as kind of look aggressive. They're wonderful dogs. It's about how they're treated, how they're looked after, the love.
What worries me, Corvia, about these dogs is what they are built to do, what they can physiologically do. So even if a Labrador is very badly brought up, it's unlikely to kill a 68-year-old.
And that's why we have to be better about the licensing on these dogs, on how people become owners of dogs.
Well, I don't want them to exist. I just don't think we should have powerful dogs in this country, Annunziata.
I think we lose an awful lot of wonderful dogs if we go down that route. It is the owners that, of course, a Labrador could kill an adult. It could certainly kill a child very, very easily. I have a Labrador cross myself, and she is the softest thing ever because she was brought up to be a kind dog. But
she's a Reese dog, isn't she? Thank you very much. I'm here all week.
But it is the owners who create the animals that harm people or want to harm people. There are dogs, and it is recorded, that are trained and blooded, I think they call it.
And in this case, it's the policing of the owner, because on the basis that they're actually, that this owner, whatever the dogs were, he was breeding them.
Okay, listen, coming up, some cracking stories, including outrage as civil servants take, oh my goodness, look at that, 8 million days off on long-term sick. That's difficult. You and I are paying for that. And also, we're going to talk about a couple of other stories in the papers, including some concerning stories in the world of sport and good news about King Charles out of hospital. Lots to come. Plus, my pundits will nominate their headline heroes and back page zeros. They got some corkers. All of that is next.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, folks, more paper reaction. That's right, tomorrow's papers are in. In the company of my top pundits tonight, former MEP Annunziata Rees-Mogg, GB News' senior political commentator, a very good friend of mine, Nigel Nelson, and former advisor to Boris Johnson, political commentator Lord Ranger. Now, Coulvier, I've been calling you Lord Coulvier Ranger, which is, it's incorrect, isn't it?
That's right. Yes,
it's wrong syntax.
Yes.
But the problem I've got is I'm a communicator.
Yes.
And I feel that if I say Lord Coulvier Ranger, we know who we're talking about. And if I say Lord Ranger, you sound like a character from a 1960s cowboy comic.
Yes, that's quite true. Or someone from Star Wars.
Or that. And you're neither. You are a cartoon character in your own right. Listen, let's have a look at some more of these stories. I want to have a quick look at the King, and he's out of hospital, greeting the public for the first time, Annunziata, since his procedure. And it's good to see him back on his feet, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think he's been absolutely right to be public about what was wrong. I think the public worry an awful lot about what happens to their monarch, and it was good to know what was happening.
Yeah.
But also to see that he is very firmly on the road to recovery.
Yes, and you've got Catherine, Princess Kate, of course, Princess of Wales, is recovering at home after abdominal surgery, in hospital for 2 weeks. That means, by definition, that it was quite serious if you spent that long in hospital.
Quite clearly, and the fact that she is off royal duties until Easter just emphasises that it was, whatever it was, quite serious. But I think she's not the Queen, and she does have a right to privacy.
How long do you think Wills should be at her side? Do you think he should already be back at work? What's his role at this time as she convalesces?
Well, I think the children need a parent, but that they are probably at school most of the time, and in fact, he should be going back and doing a bit as and when he possibly can. But my husband drive me crazy if he was sitting by my bedside bringing me cups of tea. So I'm pretty sure she'd want him out of the way a bit as well.
Like, get out of the house, make some money. Listen, fantastic stuff. We're just trying to track down the figure in the Express here for the number of days off sick in the civil service. It's certainly in the millions, long-term sick. Do you worry, Nigel Nelson, that the number of people who are of working age not active in the economy is getting worryingly high?
Well, are we talking about civil servants?
Oh, the figure is 1.8 million civil servants. Sorry, 1.8 million days of long-term sick in the civil service. Something tells me that wouldn't happen in the private sector.
No, but that's not actually a huge amount. There are about 600,000 civil servants. So even if you've got a few of those off long-term sick, you're going to run into the thousands then. So a figure like this is not that big.
Do you think it's too high? Because I worry, Kulveer, that someone's got to pay the bills, and if that many people are at home with stress or mental health, OK, I'm very sympathetic, but at some point the economy is going to fall over.
I think we do have to take that view of how people are feeling, that the stress levels are increasing in the world around us. We can't escape that. There are many things that are driving stress. But I think the more pertinent point around this is where are they working from? I think that's the challenge. You know, Annunziata's brother did walk around a government department at one point, leaving messages saying, sorry, I missed you, when he saw these racks of empty desks.
Very polite notes, yes. I should add.
We actually had a debate this last week in the House of Lords around this point, around what was happening about working environments in the public sector. And my view was the private sector is increasingly demanding people come back into the office in certain types of businesses because they know that we need to have teams working together. Now, it's not always the right thing for everybody, but there is an increasing trend. And the public sector has to work extensively with the private sector. So if they're not there, how are we going to get...
But if you're processing driving licences, say, why do you have to be at an office when you'll be sitting all day on a computer?
Nigel, I think we can take individual roles, and I think that and say, well, not for this, not for that. I think that's fine. But the general point is that teams, people, organisations, not just work together, people learn working with each other.
Annunziata, briefly?
Humans certainly need to have relationships, and an awful lot of that is done one-to-one personal interactions. But this is about the long-term sick. And I think the point is that you just don't get the same attitude in the private sector, that if you've got a job, you have to turn up. And in the civil service, there seems to be more of an attitude of, we will always look after you.
Yeah, and elsewhere in the public sector. Listen, folks, the clock's against us. All I've got time for is a sentence and a name for your headline hero. So, Annunziata, could you do your worst?
My headline hero is the British people, that we are currently in Lincolnshire fighting a big pylon issue, and it is amazing to see communities of people of all parties, all backgrounds, all coming together. If we had to go to war, we'd win.
Here's to people power. Briefly, your headline hero?
He's been bowling yesterday. He's still bowling. He's been bowling all his life, 41 years young. Sir, he's not knighted, Jimmy Anderson, 695 wickets and counting.
What a hero.
Legendary Test match cricket, and he's a national institution.
Nigel, briefly, your hero.
Esther Guy, for her extraordinary generosity of spirit, not blaming the parents of her daughter's killers.
Well, do you want to name your back page zeros? I've got a couple of seconds.
Mary Harper, BBC Africa editor who supports criminal refugees to get asylum here.
I looked at the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee notes and saw 2 members who voted for interest rate increases.
No.
And the note said that they weren't taking into account the trend.
Thriller Braverman, can I say any more?
There you go. We probably know why. My amazing pundits, thank you. You, my lovely viewers and listeners, I'll see you Friday at 8. Headliners is next.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. If you remember what weather conditions you had on Sunday, you'll probably see very similar conditions on Monday as we start off the new week. Systems are very slow moving at the moment, high pressure situated towards the south, but this weather front has become stalled across areas of Scotland and will provide very persistent rainfall across particularly western districts, the Highlands, Argyll and Bute as we head throughout the night. A rain warning is enforced and some flooding and disruption is possible. Elsewhere, a reasonably cloudy night. There's some clearer spells developing through central areas at times. Mild for all of us though, temperatures not dropping much lower than 9 or 7 degrees Celsius. A chillier start to the new week for the far north of Scotland though, with a touch of frost. And as this rain band just pushes ever so slightly northwards into the cold air ahead of it, we could see a touch of snow for the likes of Caithness, Sutherland, even to lower levels for a time. But that rain will really be persistent across western areas and it's going to provide a very miserable and wet day here. Again, relatively blustery and cloudy for most other areas. Some patches of drizzle to watch out for. Mist and murk around coastal districts. Temperatures a touch down compared to the weekend, around 9 to 12 degrees Celsius. On Tuesday, that rain band will eventually push its way slightly further southward, so moving into Northern Ireland, Northern England, a bit of mountain snow